Before we dive into chapter 2 of Uto's tutorial, let's have a quick update on DAAD Builder. Run Test Adventure in the last video revealed there are a few bugs. Firstly, the room descriptions were being doubled up. That was fairly minor. However, you may have noticed that after we added a message in process 3 to tell us that the passage was open, this never showed up in the game. It turns out that process 3 wasn't being run at all. Fixing the issue in process 3 then resulted in all the room descriptions being doubled up. Fixing that issue hasn't broken anything this time. So if we just quickly run through now where we were at the end of last video, if we now go up the staircase, pull the torch, and then we go down and back up, we now see our message that the passage leading west into the darkness is there. Another thing that came up in the last video, which I found very frustrating, was how hard it was to click on the words when adding a process at the top of the screen. So if we just go now and add a process, what I can now do if I'm searching for a verb is I can start typing something in. Now if that word isn't in the list, I can now click to add to vocabulary. And there straight away I get the chance to add that into the vocabulary, and I can give it a value as well for where it should appear. We'll get rid of that process as we don't need it. One other feature I didn't mention before is the save feature. So as you write your adventure, you'll see a message at the top that there are unsaved changes. You can click on the save button to download a current state of your project, and you can reload that with the load button. The project is being saved in your browser's memory as you go along, but obviously this is volatile and there are instances where that could be lost, so it's always worth saving your project as you go along. So on with chapter 2 of Uto's tutorial. In this one we're going to talk about objects, and as we go through, 5 objects are going to be created: an iron bar, a piece of coal, some sheets, a knife and a mattress cover. Now if we're adding that normally in a DSF file, we have different sections to add. First of all, we have the section here in the OTX section, which is a brief description of the object. And then we would add our defines if we want to add labels to the objects to make them a bit easier for humans to use. After that, we go down to the object section, and we'd have to enter the details here of where the object is going to start. In this case they are all not created, weight of the object, and then we'd give our noun and adjective. Of course then we have to go down to the vocabulary, and we have to add in each of those nouns or adjectives. That's quite a lot of jumping around in a DSF file. In DAAD Builder we can do all of that in one place. So let's go back across to DAAD Builder and have a look at how we would do this. And to start with, we want to be in the object editor. Down the side of the object editor are the rooms that we have created. At the bottom are 3 special locations: carried, worn and not created. In this case you can see there is already an object being carried. This is the torch object, which comes as default in the template. So we're going to create an object in not created. This is going to be the iron bar. If we click on the plus button next to that location, we get a quick edit box here. The first thing is the display name. This is going to be just bar. Now if we tick that, it'll make a define for us of O bar, which as we saw in the tutorial we wanted. Underneath that is a description that is going to be in the OTX section of the DSF file, and here it's going to be an iron bar. Next we want to have our noun for that, and the noun is bar. We also wanted an adjective of iron. And that's it. We now click Add. Okay, if we just jump over to the text editor now, and we'll see what that's created for us. If we go down, we now have our define, O bar. We'll go down to the OTX section, and then we have our iron bar. And in the object section, we have an iron bar not created. So that's all good. Just jump over quickly now, and I'll add the other objects, and then I'll come back and continue. Okay, that's our 5 objects in there: the bar, coal, sheets, knife, and a cover. Let's nip back over to the text editor and have a look. If we go down to our defines, we have defines for those 5 objects. If we go down to our OTX section, we have the 5 objects listed there, plus the one that's in our template. And finally the object section, which has our 5 objects, all of them not created, and their nouns and the adjective for the iron bar in place. Okay, let's jump back to the tutorial and see where we are next. We've created all our objects. The next sections explain how objects work. Again, if you're new to DAAD, this is well worth reading, but we're going to skip past that for now. And we're going to come down to adding a section of code in the process, which allows us to create the piece of coal. This should be familiar from the last video of how to do this. We'll go over to DAAD Builder and we'll add those processes in place. We now go to the process editor. Again, we want this in process 5. We're going to add a new entry at the beginning. We want to examine the fireplace, so we'll start off by adding the verb for examine, and then we'll look for fireplace, which we haven't got. We can now add that to vocabulary. Add and use. That's so much simpler than it was yesterday. Then we want our contact, at, and we want to be in the hall. We want to add a new level. We want mess. And we want to add a new message. I'm just going to copy this across from the tutorial, because I'm lazy and I don't like typing. And new contact, and we want to see where the piece of coal is, so we want is at, and we want to see if the coal is not created. We then want to add a message, and again I'm going to copy and paste this across. Create and use that. And next we want to create the piece of coal if it hasn't already been created. And then we want any key. This is actually going to be ignored in the interpreter for our adventure because it doesn't really pause for any key to be allowed. And finally restart, which is one of our quick ones on the bottom. And that's that one done. We then want another examine fireplace. We're just going to clone this one and take out the bits we don't need. So we're examining the fireplace. We're at the hall. We don't need any of these. This last one needs to become a done, not a restart. Which is that. And this one wants to be a new line. And that's those two added. The tutorial, it then says we should add fireplace to the vocabulary, but we've already done that. One quick thing to mention with objects, when we add them, they should be adding their vocabulary to the vocabulary list. But sometimes that doesn't happen, and we can click on the sync objects button, which would then sync all of those words across. It tells us everything's already in sync, it's all worked. It would tell us if it wasn't in sync that it's added the extra words into our vocabulary list. Well, that was that for that chapter of the tutorial. We'll just go and have a quick look back at the object editor and look at the objects we've created. If we go back into them, we can see we can actually access some of the other features, such as the 16 attribute flags. This is a feature which I intend to work on in the future, giving us some way of labeling these to make them a little bit more useful to use. Scenery and actors are still being developed, but will be used for adding descriptions to things in rooms, which will also be possible via the visual editor. If we go there, we go to a room, we can actually add objects already directly in from here, and we can make those into scenery and actors. But say in the description of the room we have a tree, we can then add a scenery object, which isn't actually a real object in DAAD's understanding of an object, but it'll give us a way to examine that object and to have a description about it automatically provided for us. Or actors will be NPCs. Again, currently this just creates a flag for us to use for the location of the actor. Hopefully we'll be able to develop this into something a little bit more useful. Finally, one of the other features we have when we're looking at the objects is we have an examine message box. If this is totally empty, nothing will be produced as a result of this. But if we put a message in it, for example with the piece of coal, it is black. Then if we go into the text editor and we go down to process 5, we'll see there's an auto-examine start section added for us. And if we examine that piece of coal in the game, we'll now get a message, it is black. It's just a quick way of adding in descriptions for objects which have no real purpose. You don't want to do anything deeper with other than be able to examine them and have some message about them. So let's head over to Test Adventure and see what we've done so far. We're in the first room by the guard's table and the fireplace. We should now be able to examine the fireplace. That has created the piece of coal. Now we should be able to use our auto-generated description by examining that coal. Now we examine the coal and it is black. And that just about wraps up for today for creating objects from the tutorial. And in the next video we'll go on to chapter 3 of Uto's tutorial. I'll see you then.